But before we do the getting into the discussion, let's just see what the agenda for the day looks like. It's a very easy agenda today. We're just going to really talk about the qualitative, quantitative, and the mixed methods approaches to research. So there was a conversation we had where some of you said, look, it is easy to talk about these approaches, but maybe let's sort of get more understanding of all of them and see how they relate to the work that we do. It's very important that we sort of just get into that deep dive into that and allow ourselves a moment to be persuaded whether or not we want to change our approaches or we are comfortable with the approach that we have adopted. Is well and good to be thinking along those lines, but more than anything else is really just for you to say, I do understand the differences and the complementarity that each of these approaches has, but I still feel that I'm comfortable with the chosen approach. So that's basically what we would like to do today. And again, it's really not any fault of you that you may want to change your views on certain aspects of your work, but perhaps you might just be helped in or persuaded in looking at another approach differently. But like I said, I mean, enough time in life to be doing all this, but we're just gonna really touch them high level, but also hoping that there will be further engagement. The my assessment of what the situation is on this platform is there's been some kind of leaning towards the qualitative approach to research. We'll talk about that. Very much, little to do with the quantitative. And I do understand people in the legal fraternity and some in social science, they really don't like quantitative studies. They more leaning towards qualitative, but we just have to see how these processes work with each other. So basically that's the program for the day. That's what we will try to do today. Now again, as it's the way we try, let's not just ramble on with the theories and the literature, because that you can do at your own leisure. Let's see who has got what on the platform. So I'm going to start with you, Mikateko. If you can hear us, please share with us the research approach that you are working on, and why do you work on that approach as opposed to the other approaches, if we may, we may ask.
Professor, so I initially had looked at the mixed method approach. I thought it would have been beneficial to have an understanding of what society or what owners or prospective owners felt or considered in my thesis. But I spoke to my supervisor and she directed me more towards the qualitative, like you suggested. I think it was more comfortable for her to bring my scope or reduce my scope rather than expand it.
Oh, okay. You wanna say some more about what you are. I know you're probably repeating yourself, but we just want to contextualize this conversation in any of the approaches, if you
Okay,
don't
so
mind.
my research question pertains to requiring registered plans prior to the registration or transfer at the deeds office. Uh,
Yeah.
so there are loopholes in terms of the legislative requirements. Currently, the frameworks for the municipalities require that you do have them in place, but practice, I think, provides that a lot of owners can make amendments to properties, and that's not generally disclosed on transfer. So there's a real risk that transfers to purchasers. And the legislation, however, doesn't protect prospective owners. Rather, they inherit the risk naturally. So I think that it spans through all social norms, so that it's not limited to a specific, I would say, price range or area. So the scope, if I had to go quantitative, would be quite extensive. So I
But
think that.
now, I do recall, sorry, Sanjuga, I've been rude. I do recall that part of the discussion was when we were talking about the units of analysis, right?
Mhm.
And you were more or less, suggesting that I can't remember what exactly your wording were, but that you don't necessarily have the units of analysis. What is the status now with regard to the units of analysis if we were to start there? What is your units of analysis? In other words, what and who is being studied, if I may simplify that, on units of analysis?
So I am going to study the prospective owners. So I'm drawing a comparison between South Africa and other countries like Netherlands, where the land is limited, so the registration process is quite concise. So I'm also drawing an analogy between other requirements, such as the levy requirements at the deeds officer date of registration, as well as rates. So there is a few different breakdowns.
Okay. If I were to study um, teenagers at school, at a particular school, between the ages of 13 and 15, for example, that will be my units of analysis. Teenagers at a particular school within the ages of 13 to 15. Now, in this context, I want to understand. So my conclusions, my collection of data is going to be based on the children that are within that particular school, and they will be between the ages 13 to 15. So that's my units of analysis. That's where my analysis and everything else is going to be built on. So that's what I'm asking. For your case, when I were to ask what is the units of analysis, in other words, where would your major focus of your analysis be on? In other words, what is being studied or who is being studied? Is it
If we,
owners? Is it the deeds? Is it the, that's what I'm trying to get to, which
it
is
will
which is
be the
my
rights of the prospective owners for residential property.
it will be, repeat that.
The rights of purchases on residential properties.
So
So
it will
it's
be
it's
the
limited to
purchasers, you mean the people who are purchasing the property.
yes.
So in other words, the potential buyers,
It's not just the
the
potential
buyers,
buyers. It's
the real
also the
buyers.
yes. So it is in on date of registration. The purchasers become the owners, and their rights are then they inherit the risk of the previous owners without the
Yeah.
knowledge
No,
of the risk. Yeah.
but now remember for now, that is going to make it even more interesting for me. So because if you talk about purchasers, you or buyers, you mean the process of transaction has been completed.
Yes, so the personal rights, a personal contract is in place, but it's not a real right just yet.
And where do you start and where do you stop? In other words, if you've got millions of people, because there are millions of people who own properties, say in South Africa, when say you are within the scope of my participants in the project, at what point do you then identify who, I mean, for sampling, I mean, and because the population will be millions and millions, where
Yeah.
do you then say you fall within my sampling strategy?
So this is why I'm purely doing it qualitative because the scope is too big. So I've been guided by my supervisor to limit it to purely go the qualitative approach, not the mixed method.
Okay. But then even if we go qualitative, who do you then, because if, again, to me, there will still be a sampling strategy qualitatively. But what I want to know is that who do you then say, who do you identify as relevant for your study? Because that will be my unit of analysis. That is the analysis upon which you're making this study based. I mean, it's almost like saying my study, as I mean, if you I go back to the students issue, learners, I would say my units of analysis are learners at the particular institution between these ages and so on. That will be my focus area. Basically, units of analysis is almost like what is your focus area? Is your focus area the rights of the buyer, which will be potential, or is it actual? Or is it because now once you are a buyer, you are a potential buyer, but you become a buyer at some point, then you own and so on. So I want to know who amongst this is your unit of, I mean, is your target?
It's
Is
the
it the
actual
one
buyer.
who is it the actual buyer?
Yes.
So the actual buyer, where do you start to identify them? Are you see, because the process of buying um is quite, it has got its own life. So if you say this is my, my target, these are the kind of, then you'll have buyers in many respects, and you probably even might have issues with, or you might not have issues with the cost of property is just a transfer of any property of any value. Um, please help me out there.
So
Who is this
it's
buyer?
it's any property of any value between it's not limited to an individual or it can include a juristic person and the value of the property is not of significance. Um pure it
Yes,
if
I
I
hear
could
you.
if
I
I
agree
can
with you.
yeah. So for me, the intention here is to try to protect the interest of of the prospective buyer by uh, having them be aware of the risk that they inherit and placing that burden on the stakeholders during that process.
Yes, and that makes perfect sense from the objective and aim. I can relate to that. But please tell me who, I mean, if you talk about prospective buyer, like I said, there are millions and millions walking around.
Mhm.
You don't mean all those, right? You don't mean those as part of your, because from a population perspective, everybody then becomes a prospective buyer because the value is of insignificance. The geography of where you are buying is of insignificance because you can buy, at the upper end of the deal or at the lower end of the deal, whatever the case might be. That makes even the units of analysis more difficult for me to follow because I'm now thinking, okay, who, if you were to even go quantitative, which is still something that can be done, One, is there do you have a particular jurisdiction? Because if you say South Africa and the Netherlands, you're talking 60 million minus those that can afford, and I don't know what is the situation in the Netherlands. So just looking at the legislative aspects of it, as compared to the physical, natural. Are you following my
I am.
discussion, Sanjuga?
I think I am.
Yeah.
So Professor, it's difficult for me to bring it to reduce that requirement. Uh, Essentially, for me, it's like if I had to speak about it in conveyancing terms, to
Yeah.
register a property, you need to have a transfer duty receipt. Whether it's exempt or not, you still need to have that to protect the government's tax requirements. I believe that this should also then be applied in terms of municipal plans because of the risk that passes to purchasers. So I think that my intention is to try to draw an analogy between the other requirements that exist versus this requirement, which seems insignificant but carries weight to the purchaser.
Okay.
So
Let's come back to and look, we just trying to dissect this so that we get to a point of using the point of the units of analysis. Okay, so now if I'm the seller, I'm not part of your study, am I?
no, you're not.
So it's an exclusion. If I'm a buyer, because you might have maybe 3 buyers who are potentially interested in the property. Are we, as buyers, the 3 buyers, potential buyers, your subject of the inquiry or not, when we are potential buyers?
Yes, you are.
So if there's 3 of us, you would not find it difficult. I mean, you would find it difficult to sample us, because first we must demonstrate interest as buyers. So potential buyers can run into thousands and millions and hundreds of them. You agree?
I
Because
agree.
it's not one property we are talking about. We're talking about multiple properties.
Yes, yes and
So
no.
if you are not, in other words, if you are not cutting your scope to say, focusing particularly at, let me hear this. Are you able to say, are you looking at a particular geographical location, or is just the whole jurisdiction of South Africa as a country?
It's all deeds office in South Africa, so it would be the entire republic.
Okay. So are you sampling the entire deeds office in the rest of South Africa?
Yes.
But what difference does it make if you take 1 or 2 of those deeds office in a particular area? What will be the difference in what you are studying in that area? What makes the difference? What brings the difference, if I may ask? Please
So
pardon my ignorance on this.
no, so for me it is there's a difference between the density of the deeds offices. So this population density. So in terms of Spluma was previously a requirement, and now that's been removed. And I don't quite agree with the removal of the Spluma requirements, because it did, in essence, try to bring in some control. But that has now been deemed unconstitutional. So initially, Spluma was applied for I can say non-urban areas, but it should in fact apply to all areas. So I feel like the deeds office, the concentration of the population varies between the various deeds office, but the requirement in its basic form, should protect all interests of all people, irrespective of where they're based in the country.
Okay, so let's come. So now, if you start saying the deeds office is your subject of inquiry, right? It opens the scope wider, because now I'm thinking, let's say we've got the deeds office in Kuruman. How do you interact? How do you interact with the deeds office in, I mean, there might be no deeds office in Kuruman. I'm making an example. What is the point of going to all the deeds offices for my understanding of this inquiry?
It's not
Or is it even
necessary.
necessary?
It isn't necessary for it to be applied, or for me to look at any other deeds registry. So I'm based in Johannesburg, so I could look only at the deeds office in Johannesburg. So it's not necessary to expand the scope across the country. But
Oh,
my
I thought you said your scope is, I thought you said your scope is for all the deeds office in South Africa.
Yeah, I would like it to be, because I feel like all deeds office should be uniform. But at the moment, there is inconsistencies between them.
Oh, okay. So what is your scope? So this is not your scope. The deeds office in the rest of South Africa is not your scope of your inquiry, but you are looking at the deeds office in and around Johannesburg.
Yes.
Is that what it is now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. I thought you said
No, no, no.
you are looking at.
For me, there should be no difference between looking purely at Johannesburg versus looking at any of the 10 other deeds registries. It should be uniformly applied, because the rules apply. It should apply uniformly. So there should be no difference whether I look particularly at one or at all of them.
Oh, okay. But as it stands, your study, your own inquiry is focusing on the deeds office in Johannesburg. Let's talk about your
Yeah.
inquiry now. Okay. So if the inquiry is in the deeds office in Johannesburg, right? Let's forget for a moment the rest of the country. Now, you said you're going to be focusing on the deeds office in Johannesburg, but who in the deeds office are we going to subject the inquiry to? Is it
It
the
would
entire deeds office, people working there, or is it a particular
would be
interest
the
that you've got?
it would be the registrar of deeds.
So it will be so your focus is on the registrar of deeds within Johannesburg, in the deeds office.
Yes.
So the registrar of deeds, is it one or is it multiple?
It's one office. So looking at the office of the registrar of deeds.
Yes. So when I said I'm going to Johannesburg deeds office, am I going to be talking to the registrar himself, herself, or itself, or am I talking about the registrar as an office where you might have a multiple number of people involved? What is the? I mean, I don't know what the
It's the
scenario would
latter.
be.
It's the latter.
So you could have a multiple officials that are involved in the process.
Yes.
Is it what you are looking at? Are you then saying, if I go to that office and I find multiple officials working in the this office on this project, that will be my subject of inquiry?
I would say yes, but not necessarily. I'm sorry, Professor. I don't know whether I'm answering your questions
No,
correctly,
no, no, no,
because
no, no, no. You are. It's just that I'm trying to work around the units of analysis, because now we have narrowed it down from South Africa. We have now come down to Johannesburg, so I can see the narrowing of your, because you're not saying, for me, it was not saying a lot about Johannesburg. Now you say Johannesburg. So Pretoria, Cape Town, Durban, Eastern, they are out in terms of your population. So now I'm following that.
so in terms of my my research so far, The registrar of deeds is pure administrative function. So uh, the thesis or the question doesn't allow for me to place that obligation directly on the registrar. So I need to account for that. So yes, he is a consideration of as a safety check and balance, but the units of analysis would also then draw against the municipalities.
No, the municipality just now. I want us to finish the registrar. Please don't worry about your end goal. We'll get there. I
Okay.
just want you to say, I am going to the registrar's office. Now, when you walk in there, you need to know what you're looking for, right? Now, where you get to the registration of deeds, and I'm saying you said there's just a number of people. Now my difficulty there, that I need to just clear in my mind is, do you then interview or speak to all the people in that line chain of command in the registrar, or are you looking at a particular office that is responsible for the register? I don't know if I can get there right now.
Mm-hmm. Um, I think on a question like this, it would be um, speaking to the registrar directly, because it is not a procedural or current procedural requirement. So speaking to his subordinates would um, not be fruitful.
What would you be looking for from the registrar? Let's say here is the registrar in front of you, in the deeds office in Johannesburg. I mean, you said there's a number of them, but now I take it that you mean a registrar as one person in this context, right?
Yes.
Not the office. So let's say now we've got the registrar as one person in the office. Now you're talking to this registrar. What is the kind of question that you would pose to the registrar relating to your inquiry?
I would inquire about the protection of the real right of the purchaser post registration, seeing that the purchaser is not necessarily aware of the risk that passes to him. So how do we, as the stakeholder protecting the interests of the purchaser, assist to ensure that that real right that passes on registration is aware is protected. So if I can break it down as an analogy.
No. Before you do that, Sajuga, I am a registrar,
Mhm.
right? I've got my responsibility relating to registration that
Yes.
you would be familiar with. I
Yes.
want you to tell me what what is it that you are asking me that I need to directly answer you. So, assuming you are a researcher, you are now putting a question to the registrar for which you know that question is going to be appropriate or relevant for the work of the registrar that you think he or she's not doing, which she should be doing, emanating from whatever um, requirements that you are familiar with. What is the question? Please don't generalize to other aspects of the question. Just a quantitative or a qualitative question.
Okay, so if we are passing a transfer of an oven that is improved by a dwelling, how do we ensure that that dwelling is a legal structure?
Okay, fine. Hold it there. So then the register, are you expecting that in terms of the requirements, whatever the requirements, this is
Mhm.
what the registrar should be doing? Should at least know, understand that additional dwelling that may not have been disclosed. Is that your
So
expectation?
So the expectation is that the registrar has within his rights, in terms of the Deeds Registry Act, to limit transfer in certain instances. So he may not necessarily be aware of the dwelling or of the extent of the dwelling. So that's where the loop or the gap in legislature comes in.
But in that case, how do you then say this is the question that should be directed at the register who might not be aware of such dwellings? I mean, obviously, then you think you're asking the question the right person?
You
Is this
see,
question directed at the right person who then, because if he says, I can't limit the sale of the, because I don't know so, is this question then relevant, you think?
I do think so. So the the requirement, for example, for having a levy clearance certificate is in place, and a registrar won't pass transfer until that is issued by a body corporate. There is no difference. The one is to protect an institution where the other protects an actual person. So if there is regard to one, surely the registrar can give regard to the other. So
Okay, I'm
so
not following.
so
Now,
both
okay,
are.
I'm not following. I was thinking, look, like I said, please pardon my ignorance. I'm just
Mhm.
trying to get into the research point in doing so. If you were to formulate that question where, as a result of the powers that are given to the registrar to not to limit the sale, and the question on the disclosure of a dwelling is not something that will ordinarily be known to the register. I'm saying, is the question, in your view, appropriate for the register, and if so, how?
I think the registrar relies on different facets of the legal fraternity to enable the passing of transfer. So, for example, the identification of clients, the registrar then relies on the conveyances to provide information that's true and accurate. Likewise, we are not permitted to transfer property without, say, a valid electrical compliance certificate being in place. Those are requirements that's placed um, prior to transfer, which is standard in the process, but the requirements of registered valid plans is not. So I think that this is a requirement
So,
that should be in place.
okay, so your point then, now this is changing my understanding. So your point is that the current sets of requirements do not include plans, valid plans on dwelling and so on. That's your area
Yes.
of interest. But then, if it's your area of interest, um, and it's not a requirement right now,
Mm-hmm.
are you then expect? I'm trying to look at the relevance of a question to someone who then says, "But these are my sets of requirements," and nowhere does it say I need to look at the valid plans. So what now? Because the issue that you are raising is this requirement is not at the level of the register. Am I getting you right?
It's
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 not it's
it,
not expected of the register to look at the valid plans. It's not a requirement
it's
in
not a requirement, but if the registrar so wishes, he can expand his scope. It is permitted in terms of the Deeds Registry Act.
Yeah,
And
but
if
what is your point of empirical investigation? So what is your research? Is your research that basing on this is a valid point? In other words, the valid plans issues are important at some point of sales of properties and so on. And unfortunately, right now, they do not form part of the requirements at the registration, and he has not exercised whatever to expand this scope to include that. So what then becomes your research point? What is your point of empirical investigation?
Well, it's multifaceted. One, in terms of the municipalities, they aren't able to recover the true value of rates because it's not if a property is improved, the value that changes your rates that's payable. So the municipalities are
Correct.
not recovering the correct rates from the different ovens because it's not accurately um, noted on each site on the dwellings that are being improved. So
That's correct.
so
But
that's
remember now, but remember now, you've got variables. You are
Mhm.
looking at, you've got variable. You are looking at the fact that the valid plans, as things stands, do not have some kind of, there's nobody who's responsible to ensure that that happens. The benefits of doing that, I can understand. You just mentioning one, that the municipality would then recover accurate amounts and so on. And the scope for the register will then increase in terms of just checking also valid plans, along the way. But you are a researcher. You have to get a niche where you say this is what I will be looking at, right, from a point of a research where you're now saying, you're putting it to us as, and I would say hypothetically, because it sounds hypothesis to me, which can be confirmed. You are saying at the moment, as things stands, there is a challenge in relation to the valid plans, because between the municipality and the registration or the register of deeds, that element of a requirement is not being taken care of. Is that sounds to be what you are saying? And
y-
therefore you are looking at that legal or legislation gap that you want to. So basically you can raise that as a point of research, isn't it? Because it sounds to me that then you are saying, as part of the recommendations, perhaps it should be taken care of either at the municipality level and or at the registration of this level, whatever the case might be. But as it is, it's a so you have identified a policy gap in that regard.
yes, so it is a municipal requirement currently, but there is no check and balance, and the deeds registry can be that check and balance.
Oh,
So
so is it a requirement at a municipality, but you want to see now if it's a requirement on the municipality, what is your research point on why is it not being done at the municipality? Because that's what they're supposed to be doing then.
because not everybody submits to council change plans. So often in practice, we have people purchasing property and there are no plans, not at all at council. So we could have a home that's 20 years old and no building plans be available at council. So there is a lack of inspection by the municipality, I would say. But
Mm.
so that risk on the purchaser passes, um, even though he in good faith would have assumed that plans do exist because of the structure of the age of the structure of the building.
Oh, okay. So it is now well, I don't want to use strong word, but here now you're saying the municipality is not doing their part during the existence of the structure, such that at the point of sale that a lot of things didn't take place, and therefore the risk associated with that is passed on to the purchaser.
Yes.
All right. So now back to the units of analysis. So the units of analysis for you now it moves to the fact that because of the municipality not doing what they're supposed to do, which ordinarily if they were doing it, you would then say there will be little to do from the register side, because then if the municipality is doing, if you purchase a property without housing plans it's not necessarily, or is it the responsibility of the register, or will it be the responsibility of the municipality, the council?
I think it should be council.
Yes.
It should the responsibility remains with council, but I think that with having the registrar act as a check and balance, it forces purchasers to be made aware of the risk, and if they are able to reconcile themselves with the risk, we could still pass transfer, but that choice should be given to them rather than assumed by them.
Okay. So why now when you say to me you are going to be then focusing on the purchaser as your unit of analysis, I'm now thinking, but shouldn't you be focusing on, because it's about, there's two or a couple of things that you are raising. One is that there might be properties that are owned by, under the guardianship of the municipalities and they don't have plans. Now, that's a different conversation from having the purchaser, because the purchaser only, come at the point when they want to buy. Secondly, at the point when there is a potential buying and the register comes on board, it is at that level where a lot might not have happened, that it then sort of disadvantages the purchaser. So at what point do you then say, these are the purchasers that I'll talk to? Because it sounds to me that is a group of people or individuals whose rights seem not to have been sufficiently protected. So for you to then do this research, you need to be focusing on those purchasers whose rights have not been, or they are aggrieved because of some of these disclosures that come on board at a later stage. Because now the municipality may not necessarily be, if the municipality didn't do its work, they've not done the work, and that has been passed on to purchasers. So in other words, are you then going to talk to purchasers who have had some experiences with this, or is just going to be randomly going for purchasers? Are you following that, Sanjuga?
Yeah, I
Sorry, I
am.
might have.
No,
Yes,
I
because
do.
now, yeah, okay, please go ahead.
I have spoken to purchasers, so it's quite a common occurrence where there is a lack of plans. And we then get to a point where we either need to try to ensure that the plans are registered prior to transfer, or that we allocate anticipated losses on behalf of the purchaser. But this is not always made aware timeously. So certain purchasers are fortunate enough to have this unearthed before registration, but if this occurs post registration, there is no safeguards for the purchaser.
Okay, so who is a purchaser? Is a purchaser the person who has already completed the deal process, or how do you define them for sampling strategy purposes? Is it
So
someone?
it's somebody who had entered into a deed of alienation with a current owner of a property.
That is the. So are you going to sample those ones as per
Yes.
the definition?
Yes.
Or you have some, so you're going to go to the deeds of, where do you draw them, where do you get such a population, so you can sample them? Is it from the deeds office, from the municipality, or from the work that you are doing?
From the
Wh-
work
wh-
that I'm doing.
so you're going to have a database of such cases of purchasers as per your definition, and then you sample from them, basing it in Johannesburg.
Yes.
So what is the size of that population, if I may ask? How big is the population?
Uh,
Estimation, not exact, of course.
my
Are we
sampling
talking?
population.
Yeah, there's no the total population from where you drawing this sample from, using your definition.
I can't say that offhand.
Is it hundreds, thousands, or what?
I
Are they
would
in
say
hundreds, in
hundreds.
thousands? Because remember, when we'll have to talk to sampling soon. Remember, if you've got a small number, you can survey all of them. So in other words, if you're sitting with 100, you can survey all 100 because it can just be a questionnaire to all of them and one or two interviews, with one or two of them. Now you've got both the quantitative and so you may actually find that you may want to do your mixed method discussion. But let's pause here. I think you probably feel like, oops, this is really long. But for me, I'm saying, hear you saying your unit of analysis will be purchasers of properties within Johannesburg. You are going to focus on those as your units of analysis, and you to be about the rights, that have been either violated or not, or respected in the process. So you've got the units of analysis which goes into the purchasers. You are not going to be talking to anybody else other than. So these are individuals who are purchasing or who have completed the purchase as per your definition that are potentially your units of analysis. Because it sounds like it's individuals. Those are the ones that are being studied. And you are studying them in terms of looking at, protecting their rights going forward. Does it make sense?
Yes, that does.
So this is how long we have taken, and we've come around to say your study will have units of analysis, because your units of analysis is going to say, I'm sampling from them. Whether you do qualitative or quantitative, it's still going to be the purchasers. You look at what the legislation says, and who are the different stakeholders in the process. Why is it that they are not doing what the work that they need to do? Some of which is not done by municipalities, but they are now focusing on Johannesburg, and you say, why is this not done? And the recommendation is going to be, this must be done, and perhaps this is how you. So we do have a unit of analysis. But I see Tabitha wanted to make comment. But is that okay if we move off that point, Sanjuga? Are you now? I hope you are not too completely now confused, and I don't want you to be confused.
Thank you, Professor.
Is it you're not confused? Are you getting clearer as to what is the point? And look, I'm linking your point on the rights of the purchaser and the fact that you'll then be identifying the purchasers, and of course the municipality and the deeds will be part of the scope that you will talk to them. But in essence, your interest is on this gap that already exists, that you want to close empirically from your study. It
Yes.
makes sense to me now.
Thank you for the clarity.
I just want to make certain inputs for Sanjuka's research. So on Sanjuka's topic, I will think that she should also look at the duties of the duties and responsibilities of the seller himself or herself as the person who has a responsibility to disclose what the problems are with his or her property, either the latent defects or just minor defects, and also the duties and responsibilities of the estate agents in cases where the estate agent is involved and a commission is paid to that estate agent to ensure that the offer to purchase is done accordingly. Because I don't see the registrar of the deeds office as the person who has to answer Sanjuga's questions, because the registrar's duty is only for disposal and alienation of that particular right. But the municipality, to a limited extent, has a responsibility in terms of the clearance certificates and all that. But the main people that I think Sanjuga should pose her questions on is Sanjuga's participants is the estate agents and the seller themselves, because the offer to purchase will then set a tone for this particular transaction. And in the offer to purchase, there are items which the seller should indicate if this is in order, that is not in order. And if that particular seller then fails to disclose that, then the prospective buyer, who will then eventually be the owner after the right has been registered, can then take that seller to task and claim whatever losses or costs they have incurred as a result of the non-disclosure of the seller. Yeah, so that is just my input. Thank you.
So yeah, the duties of the owner and then the estate agent, I'm sure all those will be taken in consideration when the research unfold. But in essence, it's still about the protection of the right of the buyer eventually. So thanks for that input. I think it's taken note of. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have had a long conversation with Sanjuga, but you are hearing that all we were trying to do in the discussion was to really come out with what you call units of analysis. All kinds of research that we do, you need to look at what is your units of analysis, because if you do not define your units of analysis, the scope of your work is very vast, and at times you also miss the target as to what your research is all about. Your research is always about the units of analysis. In this case, it's always going to be the rights of the purchaser, as you are hearing the conversation that we had with Sanjuga, the purchaser's right to, when they buy property. So look at your own research environment and say, what is my unit of analysis? I mean, I used a very simple example of children between the ages of 15 at a particular school. Why? Because I'm not going to be analyzing children in Soweto. I'm not going to be analyzing children in Kaelicha. I'm not going to be analyzing children in Hlaboyalengan. I'm focusing on these children in this particular area between these ages. That's very important for you to look at your own research and say, by the way, what is my units of analysis? Just to make it easy, when you talk about units of analysis, especially for you, Tabitha, because the others have already mastered this discussion, we look at the elements or the members of the population. It could be individuals, it could be groups, it could be organizations, it could be events, it could be artifacts or social interaction. You can look at it from that point of view. That's your units of analysis. And is the what or the who is being studied. So every time you go to do a study, there's always going to be, what am I studying or who is being studied? It's important for you to identify that. Now, next time you hear this term units of analysis in your research, when you put a topic out there, I should be able to see variables, both independent and dependent, and units of analysis. And if somebody says to you, yeah, but my research doesn't have a units of analysis, it's not the next exercise that you should really use it to demean people. It's something that perhaps you need to assist people to identify who in the population is being studied. Are they individuals? Is it groups? Is it organizations? Is it events? So you can study anything, even when you take artifacts. People can, there are those who look at an artifact and say, I want to study it in detail. That as a point of inquiry, it's a unit of analysis. Your focus is on the artifacts, not on individuals, not on organization, not on group, not on the fight between Iran and America and Israel, but on the artifacts. That's your unit of analysis. So that's what I thought, we need to clarify, because the last time we were talking about it, I was under the impression that perhaps we did not do justice to this conversation. There is a unit of analysis in all the studies. Now, when you look at the research framework, which is what we are trying to also make as simple as possible, is that we talk about in the middle the research approaches. Research approaches, in the space that we are in, you can either do qualitative You can do quantitative, and you can do math. Earlier on, Sanjuga saying I was doing mixed methods, but I think I'm actually tempted now to go back to qualitative methods, research. Now, this is just, it's a combination of reasons. Amongst others is what is it that you are studying? But also, I think as a researcher, sometimes you also have to acknowledge and recognize your own strength, as a researcher. Some researchers are very good with qualitative um, studies, others are good in quantitative, others are good in both. They can do qualitative and quantitative. So depending on what you are investigating or what you are researching, that can also call for the combination or a particular framework. Now, your approach is going to inform your design. So if you then say, I'm going qualitative, then everything else is going to have to follow quantitative. If you go qualitative, same. And if you go mixed methods, say similar. So that's what you're going to do. So it gives the opportunity to consider how to contribute to or to limit the study. So once you've got the research approach, you now have an opportunity where you know how to limit your study and how you're going to contribute. Because if you say my study is going to be qualitative, it means you're going to contribute qualitatively from a scientific point of view. Or if you go quantitative, similar. But on all these approaches, whether it's mixed methods, quantitative, qualitative, you know that there's going to be an analysis, a collection of data, analysis of data, and of course, the interpretation of data. So these three methods, none of which exonerate any researcher from collection, from analysis, and from the interpretation of data. So it's just a question of which collection instrument are suitable for this approach, and so on and so forth. Which analysis are suitable for this approach, and how do I interpret data that I've collected using this approach? So if you are going quantitative, there will be a way to collect, to analyze, to interpret. If you're doing qualitative, there's a way to collect, to analyze, and to interpret. And similarly, if you do mixed methods, you go through the same process. We did this last week, but for completeness, we can repeat this. Now, if you do quantitative, here you're going to be studying relationships. You're going to be studying cause and effect. What is the relationship between this and that? Is the relationship, what is the nature? Is it the positive, correlational, cause and effect, negative, whatever? There's a relationship between variables. These variables relate. That's what you look at when you look quantitatively. Qualitatively, on the other hand, you examine a phenomenon as it is. So you basically going into the deeds office, and you talk to the register and you ask him, what do you think about the rights of a purchaser in relation to defects and whatever else that you are looking at? Now they give you their own understanding in rich details, because they speak to you as per your purpose. Now, in terms of the design, with the quantitative, it's developed prior to study. I mean, about questionnaires, you go there. Sometimes you don't even have to go. You send it. It's already prepared, pre-packaged, predetermined, and so on. So all I have to do is receive it. I don't know whether people are still receiving it in post or via your smartphone, or somebody knocking at your door and what have you, and they just want to tick the well, not tick, maybe I'm using a wrong word there, but they collect quantitative data, within using the platforms that are available. Whilst on the other hand, if you look at qualitative, you are flexible. You actually, is like thinking on your feet, because you can walk in there. The register might actually say, I'm in the middle of something. Please give me a few minutes. We'll engage. Then the next thing, you sit in there, you ask one question, they answer it, and it's almost like when you go to an interview and somebody asks you, tell us about yourself, and you've already set everything else that now they've got no other question. I mean, 5 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever long, you are done. Now, that is the flexibility that you get in the qualitative. But otherwise, you have a way within which you now develop other questions along, because you are mindful of the fact that the way in which your participants are going to respond on the qualitative, because of the flexibility, will not be the same. In terms you use the pre-selected instruments for quantitative as opposed to qualitative, where in a qualitative, you as a researcher, you tend to become a primary data collection tool. So you sit in and you ask the questions and you record this, you transcribe, and so basically it's like you need to be there to ask the question, whilst on the other hand of quantitative, you don't necessarily need to be there. Now, for sampling, if you go quantitative, it's large samples. Now, this is why I was asking Sanjuga earlier, how big is your population? Because if the population is big, you sample from the bigger population. But you can imagine if you're sitting with 100 or less than 100, it is advisable that in such situation you sample everybody, because it's a small sample, I mean, a small population. So on the other hand, if you go qualitative, sampling doesn't really, the sample doesn't have to be large. I mean, you can talk to 2-3 people, that's it, so that's what the difference is between the quantitative and qualitative. Large samples on the other side, qualitative, and then a small sample on the qualitative side. Remember, it doesn't matter. It's not about whether you like large sample or small sample. It's about which approach, research approach, you are comfortable with. You can do large samples and you send questionnaires, or you use apps. Nowadays, we know that the people are able to be reached through the use of internet and technology. So it's not about, oh, no, I don't want large sample. You can still reach thousands and millions of people using technology. Now, for the analysis, if you look at the quantitative study, you use statistical analysis of numeric data. For example, you're 20%, you're 60%, you're 80%, and your graphs and all that. That becomes part of your quantitative analysis of data. Whilst on the other hand, the qualitative one, you more likely you are using narrative description, interpretation, and of course that's where you find a lot of people being quoted verbatim, where they say things as they say, and so forth and so on. This is what makes the difference between qualitative and quantitative. Mixed methods on the other side is really bringing both together. They sit somewhere in the middle. You collect both quantitative and qualitative data, and you use multiple forms of data where you draw in a lot of possibilities. Remember, the use of multiple forms of data is also great in research. We spoke about it, we'll repeat it now. It's still something to do with, for example, triangulation. So it's okay to really look at multiple forms of data where you send questionnaires, you talk to people, you read some information that is credible as a source, and you combine all together to do the analysis. But as we said, I mean, if you do analysis quantitatively, it's about really interpreting the statistics. So you analyze it, you interpret it. On the other side, when you do the narrative description, you then come up with themes and of course patterns of integration. So basically, you're creating themes where you say, what do people think about this? So because you are getting this from the participants or from the individuals, that your units of analysis, you are able to generate themes from what they say instead of perhaps using statistical interpretation, because that will be more relevant within the quantitative approach. Now, again, if we look at the qualitative approach, ladies and gentlemen, we say this one is an appropriate approach when you are exploring, and understanding the meaning of individuals or groups that they ascribe to a social or human problem. So you're exploring that. You want to know, why are people, behaving in the way that they behave, or why are groups doing the way that are behaving or performing the way they do. The process involves emerging questions and procedures, where data is typically collected in the participant's setting. Your data is going to be analyzed inductively, where you build from particular to general themes. So there will be particular themes where you want to know why are the whatever. I mean, the fact that you are saying why in the way that they do, you actually inviting the reasons that are going to be given to you by the people that you are studying. So it's not you are behaving in this way because of. It is them who are going to tell you why are we behaving the way that we do, and then you build that from the particular to the general. So you as a researcher, you make interpretations of the meaning of that data. So they tell you why we behave in the way that we do. So there's really the difference between quantitative and qualitative from that point. So one of the chief reasons why you conduct qualitative study is that you are, exploring the phenomenon. So this usually means that not much has been written about the topic or about the population being studied. And you as a researcher, you seek to listen to participants and you would seek to build understanding based on what you are hearing. So essentially you go there and you want to immerse yourself in how people are thinking and so on. Now, there are different types of that qualitative designs. One is there's a narrative research, there's a phenomenological research, there's a grounded theory research, there's an ethnography, and there's case studies. These are just some types of qualitative studies that you can conduct. Please feel free again to go through other sources that you can find just to improve on your understanding, because this is now something that we encourage at this platform, that you are welcome to use other sources and engage us on those sources. There's no limit in that. Now, when you look at the narrative research, which is a qualitative type, here is an inquiry from, which studies the lives of individuals, how individuals live, and you ask them to provide stories about their lives. So you talk to people, they give you their stories, and this information there for you is then got retold or restored into a narrative chronology. I mean, then it's like you've studied this nation or this group of people, and this is how they live, and so on and so forth. So it combines the views from the participants' life with those of your life in a collaborative narrative. So what you do as a researcher, you go into a community, a population, you study them, you then narrate the stories or retold their stories in a narrative chronology. Phenomenological research, I mean, you hear people saying, I'm going to approach this from a phenomenological point of view, or I'm going to conduct a phenomenological study on this and this and that. Basically, what it means is in the phenomenological research, you're going to describe the lived experiences of individuals about the phenomenon that is described by participants. So there's a particular phenomenon. In research we use the word phenomenon, but actually there's a particular thing that the participants are going to describe to you, and they're going to tell you what they've gone through. It's almost like if you talk to some South Africans who have gone through the colonization, apartheid, and the freedom. This is their lived experiences. So you can actually talk to them about that, and they can take you through what they've gone through. It culminates in the essence of the experiences for several individuals who have experienced the phenomenon. So basically, you can get a group of people and you engage with them about their own experiences of, say, democracy or apartheid or colonialism or whatever. So basically, you also describe that lived experience from the participants, because the phenomenon in this case could be the lived experience through the different political epochs. Now, it has strong philosophical underpinnings and typically involves conducting interviews. So when we are going to do phenomenological research, we expect, because it's a qualitative study, we expect you also to conduct some interviews, because it is from that interview that you get this rich wealth of information. Grounded theory, this one as an inquiry derives a general abstract theory of a process or an action or interaction grounded in the views of participants. It involves using multiple stages of data collection, the refinement, interrelationship of categories. So you basically have different stages at which you collect data to to inform the theory. Ethnography, an inquiry that is coming from, if you like, the anthropology or sociology, which studies the shared pattern of behaviors, language of an intercultural group within a natural setting. So if you want to go, you want to understand the Congolese, for example, the Burundians, you can go and do to understand their behaviors, their language, their actions, and so on and so on. So that's what you can immerse yourself with as well from an ethnography point of view. Case studies, you hear people saying, I'm going to conduct a case study or case studies. For example, you look at Johannesburg and you look at Amsterdam, and I think that's what I was hearing, Sanjuga also talking about possible case studies, or maybe more, or it doesn't matter. It's an inquiry which you found in many fields, especially evaluation, in which you as a researcher, you develop an in-depth analysis of a case, often a program or an event or an activity or a process or one or more individuals. So cases are bound by time and activity. So as a researcher, you collect detailed information where you use a variety of data collection procedure over a sustained period of time. So these are just some of the types of qualitative studies that you can think about, ladies and gentlemen. So when you say you're going to do qualitative study, please just look at it and say, which of this qualitative study do I think my investigation fit in? So it's a qualitative, yes, so you can actually move and you say, which qualitative will that be? Is it narrative? Is it phenomenological? Is it grounded? Is it ethnography? Is it case study? And it's okay. I mean, you can actually have a mixture of all these or one of them. On the other hand, if you look at the quantitative research approach, here, remember we said, in a quantitative, it generally is an attempt to understand the issues from the viewpoint of the larger number of participants. Important. So here, you've got a larger number of participants, so it doesn't matter what I think about my colonialism, apartheid, or democracy. If a large number of people say what they say, that is what you are trying to understand here. So there could be a lot of people who say maybe democracy is bad, you know, or maybe apartheid is bad, or whatever the case might be, whatever you are studying. But it's an example of large number of participants. Remember that statistical analysis and of numeric data is also important at the quantitative research approach level. Quantitative research is an approach for testing objective theories by examining the relationship among variables. Remember, we said you are looking at variables and you look at how do they relate with each other. Is there a relationship between variable, abuse of alcohol and maybe crime, as an example, or teenage pregnancy and the use of drugs? Are there any relationship among those variables? So these variables can be measured typically on an instrument so that number data can be analyzed using statistical procedures. So, if we then go and say, what do you think about the current war that is waged in the world? So you can then do a number around it and say, how many people say is a good thing, is a bad thing, and they don't know, and. So as you have those numbers, you analyze them statistically, and you are able to give us what the views are of the large number of people or participants that you selected. You select this number from where? You select them from a population. So the next time when we engage on a population and sampling, we'll discuss that a little bit more. There are types of this design is surveys and experiment. Now, when you look at the quantitative design, for example, if we look at the experimental research design, you can have a true experiment where you interview people in their own natural setting where they are comfortable, and you are able to control the environment as well. For example, you take people through training. They sit there for 3 months. You test them before they come for training, and you test them during training and after training. So you can have those levels of a true experiments, and you can actually see, whether there is a better improvement because of the intervention if you do pre-testing and post-testing. A quasi-experiment is not a full experiment, but it's almost like a semi, it's not a real experiment, but close to being an experiment. On the other hand, you've got the non-experimental quantitative design. This one talks to your causal comparative research, in which you as a researcher, you can compare groups in terms of a cause that has already happened. So you take two groups and you compare them and you say, they all went through this COVID, but how, let me just see how they now behave, post-COVID, because all of them might have gone through the same process. Correlational design, in which you use the correlational stats to describe and measure the degree or association. Is there a relationship? If we say association, in this case, between two variables or sets of scores, the relationship. Is there any correlational relationship between those people who have been vaccinated and those who have not been vaccinated? Whatever. I mean, I'm really using crazy examples, but it's just that you need to understand the non-experimental research design. A survey provides a quantitative or a numeric description of trends. It can be attitudes, opinions of a population by studying a sample of that population. So when you do a survey, if you come to, let's say now Johannesburg in the Deeds office, if you sit with thousands and thousands of people in that office and you want to understand the trends, the attitude or opinion, you can simply just, do a quick survey and they will be able to give you their trends, their attitudes and opinions, because they might be representing a population, which is a population of the Deeds office. If I want to do a survey about the non-delivery by municipalities, I could do a survey where I take all the 200 plus municipalities, identify who I need to send the survey to, and they fill up the questionnaire, and then I sit and sample, because it's a sample of that population, and make a conclusion. I'm sure you see that a lot with auditors when they do their auditing and other structures that you probably interact with. It includes, the survey can include cross-sectional and longitudinal studies where you use questionnaire or structured interviews for collection of data with the intent of generalizing from the sample. So when you look at longitudinal studies, is those that you can do over time. I mean, somebody studied you when you were at primary, they now look at you when you are at secondary, they looked at you when you started tertiary, they're now also doing this study when you are at your master's and doctoral level. They probably will be able to give a view, a scientific view on your behavior or your attitude or your opinion over time. But remember also, as a person, there are things that could influence the way in which you perceive a phenomenon of life. I mean, you can have at the primary, you might have a different experience that perhaps when you get to, high school, when you get to university, and now that you are at this level, perhaps your perception and your views of things in life may have changed. So a longitudinal study it's also one of those studies that you can think about within a survey. On the experimental research side, for example, here you want to you actually you seek to determine if a treatment influences an outcome. As I was saying earlier, you're working for a company, you are a boss of the company, and you're now suffering from some level of productivity, and you identify people that needs to go through an intervention or through some kind of treatment in order to influence the outcome, which the outcome being better productivity. So you can look at the experimental research design. So here you assess this by providing a specific treatment to one group, and then you don't do that to another group. You know about the experimental and the non-experimental group. So other people go for training, the others do not go for training. So experiments will include true experiments where you can assign subject to treatment condition. You send others to training, and then you keep others for no training. So you can then compare those who went for training with those that did not go for training, meaning you could test both of them at the same time and you know where they are. And then you test them after the training, and those that did not train, you probably will get different results, from those who went to training. If you don't, if they still come back and the same results, a lot about the intervention, that perhaps there was no need for the training to take place. I mean, if I were to use an example, now are attending this conversation that we have on a regular basis. If we tested you at the time when we started, and we went to other groups, and we tested all of you, and now later on, Godfrey and I administered the instrument of testing you post the going through this in an experimental design, and you still come out the same score as those that we did not even have to come to this. UNISA would simply say, oh, maybe this program doesn't really work. Now, I'm sure there could be a number of examples that you can think about where we all together, we start at a certain point, get tested, somebody goes for treatment or for a specific intervention, the manipulation of that independent variable, and I don't. So we come back, we compare. There must be a difference between those who went through the independent variable because the outcome has been manipulated, as opposed to those who did not go through any form of treatment. This, ladies and gentlemen, has been such a long lecture. I need you to engage.
I'm still on my proposal.
Oh.
My research is on protecting the rights of fugitives.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. Yes.
So you're looking at protecting the right of fugitives from which point of view?
SADC. At this point, it will be SADC countries. I'm looking at South Africa and Malawi, Botswana and South Africa. Yeah.
So you're sampling.
That's what I can think at.
You're sampling countries, and you want to see how they protect fugitives.
Yes.
What is the angle? Why are you asking that question to who? To countries? Malawi will have a Prophet Bushiri as a fugitive.
In actual fact, yes.
Isn't it is a fugitive from a South African point of view?
There is. You are right.
So you want to ask Malawi. You want to ask Malawi what are the rights that Prophet Bushiri should enjoy in his home country, or a fugitive in the SADC region? What is the angle?
Yes, you are right. Actually, what my paper is looking at the a contrast between the extradition and the deportation processes in protecting the human rights of fugitives.
So you're looking at those protocols that are in place to protect the fugitive, the deportation, and the extradition. You say
yes. Whether those processes are they enough to protect the rights of fugitives?
Okay. Sanjuga should be your friend because it sounds to me you're also going to be looking at now you're looking at what the legal regimes or what I mean if you go to Malawi let's use Malawi because we've got the fugitives there. Now if you look at Malawi, are you then going to ask Malawi to share their regime, their legislative protocols which are within the SADC as to the extradition or deportation, or you're going to look at what is it that they do to fugitives?
Yes, what is it that they do? What processes do they follow when they bring the fugitives into the books, whether through an extradition or deportation? So I will
That's a
obviously
massive
look at
study.
it is, yeah, it is.
Are you
It
funded?
is. Pardon?
Do you have some funding that you are? I mean, I'm just imagining if you say
No,
4 countries, that's already massive.
but I'm just at this stage I was looking at legislation and case law.
Also, you're just going to try
Yeah,
to
case
limit
law,
your. Oh,
legislation,
okay.
and treaties.
Oh, okay. So you're gonna do more
Yes.
of studying documents.
Yes, I'm gonna do more on studying of case law.
But then why is it then that you are using? Okay, but you can answer that. I'm just asking a rhetoric question. You know, which so from the SADC, have you selected a number of countries? You said, it's like 4 or 5.
Botswana, the one that I'm sure about at this stage is Botswana. And reason being due to the fact that Botswana still has a death penalty, and in South Africa that is no longer applicable.
And SADC is also based in Botswana.
And SADC is also, yeah, Botswana is part of SADC.
Yes, I'm just saying their offices.
Yes.
Okay, so it's Botswana, but what is that has to do with death penalty now?
Remember that if you have a South African citizen and who has done something wrong in Botswana, has violated, let's say, in the instance of death, and then they have to apply the death penalty. Whereas this side, that fugitive is in South Africa and they have to take him that side. So already that is against our constitution. So there is a study that shows that the certain rights that countries must comply to. In actual fact, countries must comply to the standard of international human rights.
Yes, but I'm just saying, why are you using the death penalty in Botswana? Because that may not necessarily be. Your point was extradition and deportation, right? Not necessarily the consequences of it. I mean, different countries will have different regimes that they apply. But if the protocols are SADC protocols because the constitution of South Africa has got no effect in Botswana. Botswana will have their own laws and so on. So I'm trying to say, why did you just like now just pick on Botswana?
Because of that, remember that if it's somebody who's here in South Africa, because there's a case law to that effect.
Oh,
Where
I thought, sorry, Noctul, I thought you were saying you have sampled a number of Botswana was one of them. No.
No, not yet. I'm still studying on it. Not yet.
But remember, if you're now dealing with death penalty, I am saying that then is no longer talking sufficiently to what you were looking at, because you were looking at deportation and is it deportation and extradition? Did you say extradition?
Yes, the contrast between the two and how they should not infringe on human rights.
Yes, I hear that. But I'm saying for me, that is the gist of your study. So in other words, you're looking at the applicability of member states within SADC on the extradition and deportation. I mean, there are people who got killed as they were extradited to, as there was an extradition to, is it Zimbabwe in South Africa at some point. So those are, I'm saying there can be those, but I think you are saying you're still figuring out how to go about it. Is it not?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I'm still doing my, what's this, literature review.
But you see now there is a difference on focusing on your extradition and deportation and fugitives, because it sounded to me that initially it was about the fugitives, but I think as I listened to you going out of is it what is the lady from Free State who was also
Yes, in actual
extradited
fact,
from?
my research is based on those cases. I might look at her
So you're
cases.
gonna look at Thabo Best and Magudumana
Yes,
who were moved
Tanzania and
from
South
Tanzania.
Africa. Yes.
Oh, okay.
And Malawi, and South Africa and Botswana and South Africa. And then also look into the certain principles that were noted in the judgment, in the Free State judgment that I'm still looking into.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we will engage you some more. I don't know. Koketso, do you wanna say something there? This sounds, sorry, I seem to remember you also looking at some rights of some people, but you are focusing in and around Pretoria, if I'm right. What is your view there, Koketso?
Well, well, first of all, it's enlightening to listen to other people's research proposals or what they have in mind and how you are able to guide them, almost bring them back in line. What she seems to be researching is different from mine, because
Yes, of course.
I have specified the sample first of all to Pretoria, which is the small place which I can easily access at the moment, and to children and how they are affected by the lack of, can I say, services to their illegal immigrant parents, and how that has been generational,
Yeah,
and the impact that has on um, on on uh, on their well-being and their success, their growth, their personal development. So she seems to be looking more at
she's
a
looking
higher level.
at people like who is
Bushiri,
this guy? Bo Guptas and the Bushiris and the white guy who ran. So
yes,
he's looking at those. But I think that what I'm interested in, this is why I
yes,
was picking up on you, is that you've been able to bet your focus
yes.
in a particular location, because for ease of research as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I listen to Millicent or Noctula, I think it's going to be too difficult. But then she says, no, I'm just going to look at documents. But now yours is it's you've already done a lot more work,
Yes.
and she's still putting things together. So please avail that information as soon as we start pushing her into thinking. You see, she is talking about elements that changes as we speak. For example, death penalty. Now I'm
Yes.
thinking, what is it now? Are we looking at death penalty? I mean, there are fugitives. A fugitive is somebody who's my simple definition is running away from facing
Okay.
the consequences of his or her action, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Now she's saying she wants to see how they are treated. Now she needs to know, how are the Guptas treated where they are now? We don't know. Now, is it what she's studying? Maybe not, because they are gone. We don't have them. And the only way to know how they are treated is to interact with them where they are.
Prof, I seem to also understand her to say legislatively and according to human rights, you can't deport somebody to a country that is in contradiction with your own rights. For example, our constitution does not allow for a death penalty, and if we uh, um,
Deport.
deport somebody from South Africa to a country that has that still recognizes yes, we are opening them up to a violation of our constitution.
Exactly.
And
that is
yes,
another way. That's another way of looking at it. Koketso, to say, is it what we are looking at? In other words, is it where we are looking at the extradition and deportation where perhaps the national law does not allow for certain things, like if you do Thailand
yes,
and
yes.
drug dealing there. So that can be another way of looking at it as well. So they're different. That's why I was saying, I'm glad that you are raising it, because what Millicent is saying is that there's still some angles that she's still firming up, and with a literature review, she would possibly have a better structure going forward.
Yeah.
I think so.
I believe so too, Prof.
And I think what Sanjuga was doing earlier was also a demonstration that start thinking broadly, but for research purpose, then you narrow it down to say, I mean, there's nothing wrong, Noktula, by the way, in just looking at two countries, South Africa and Botswana, and whatever the case might be. And maybe also picking up one or two cases and saying, this is a case study. Remember, we're also talking about a case study where you look at how was this dealt with, how is it been handled, what are the laws says, what are the protocols, and so forth and so on. And then you can interview one or two people. Those options are available in research. You as a researcher, you are the one who decide and set up how the scope of your project should be. And I know the temptation to go big is always very appealing. But sometimes, when you narrow it down, it will, you start from the small situation, then you can, sort of grow into a bigger study as well. Hence, I was asking, oh my word, if you've got 5 countries in the SADC, that's good enough. And who do we talk to? It sounds to me in the space of international relation, law enforcement issues, and so on. So that's the interest that you have triggered, Noktula, and we're glad that you spoke to us. But yeah, feel free to interact with us, on regular basis if you find this conversation helpful. If not, we apologize.
I've got just 2 things to say. The first one, I wanted to ask the colleague who's doing the research on fugitive. I don't know how far is she going to do that, take into account that the difference between deportation, extradition versus fugitive, because I mean, fugitive normally describes a person who's evading legal authorities, normally locally, but it may also involve a person like Bushiri, who ran away from our country to his own country. But the primary issue when you talk about fugitive, we're talking about person in our own country. But it may include the person from outside the country insofar as it relates to deportation or extradition. But I think it sounds to be
former presidents of some difficult countries are good examples.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it will appear as if it to be an extensive kind of research. But yeah, I think it may also involve a lot of funding as such.
No, I think Mbazima, let's give her a benefit of the doubt, because she said she's still figuring out, the scope and so on. Because in Botswana, I was going to ask. I mean, we've got a fugitive. Well, I don't know whether it's still the case now. The former president of Botswana, who's in the country in South Africa. Now she wants to know, how are these people treated? So it means she has to get into a South African landscape and ask the treatment that is been given to. I mean, we can mention many names here of some of the fugitives. But like I said, I think let's agree that she has said she's still doing some conducting some literature review. And I think from there, we would be able to engage him more because we're looking forward to that literature review as to what is he getting. But I don't know. And it might as well be that maybe the focus is not South Africa. I mean, it could be any country within SADC as well, as she said.
No, I agree. You're right. I think you're right, Professor.
So what is your quick area of interest, if I may? I see Tabitha's hand is up.
Mine is a nice one. It will attract trade unions. I'm doing research on. I want to make a proposal to the government that to put a legislation to oust the jurisdiction of the courts, especially in labor litigation.
I think you spoke about that you could use. Instead of waiting that long to go to the labor court, we could use the local courts to also arbitrate such matters.
No. This one, my research concentrate on the issue of cost orders.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm doing research on the effect of cost orders against employees who are not represented by lawyers.
Okay.
Because I believe that those cost orders have got chilling effects. It discourages workers to seek justice because they're afraid that if they lose cases, they will be ordered to pay
cost them
of their opponents. Yeah.
What is your? Do you have a particular sector, communities, a population that you are focusing on, or is just court orders under general, which cannot be?
No, I'm limiting my research on labor litigation. So, in other words, amongst workers and employers who appear before the labor court or before the arbitrators in person, not through lawyers.
Okay. So that kind of data you get from courts from.
Yeah, I will use some sort of a case studies.
Okay.
Also looking historically, what was the attitude of the courts in the past? Did the courts give cost orders against unrepresented litigants or not? And if the courts did not do like that, why are we changing that? Why are we allowing our courts to make cost orders against unrepresented litigants? When they appear before the labor court, labor appeal court, and the CCMA.
So, what is your view? Your view is that they shouldn't be.
Exactly. My view is that the government must make a legislation, must enact a legislation to oust the jurisdiction of the courts from granting the cost order. So it shouldn't be dependent on the discretion of the presiding officer. We must have a national legislation to oust the jurisdiction of the courts.
Is there no such? What is this current situation? Is there no such provision?
Yeah, no. The current situation is it still gives the court the discretion whether or not they must order the cost against unrepresented litigants and any other litigants. Depending on the conduct, for example, of the litigant, or depending on the circumstances of the case. For example, if there's an abuse of the court process, the court may order the unrepresented litigant to pay costs. So what I've discovered is one thing here. I'll just give you one example as my last point. If I'm an employee, I appear before the labor court, and then I win the case. They're saying that look, your opponent can pay the cost, but your costs are limited to disbursement, like traveling or making copies. Whereas if me, the same person who's losing the case, and then they order me to pay the cost of my opponent who's represented by the lawyers, I may end up paying a lot of money, the legal fees of my opponents. So to me, that also constitutes unfair discrimination, really.
I see. I'm going to park this conversation. It sounds very interesting. Sorry, I confused your research with someone else's research. I hope they're here. they can speak for themselves that I misrepresented them. But it sounds interesting because at the end of the day, research solves problems. Research makes suggestions for solutions of problems and also development going forward. So there's nothing wrong in what you guys say you are doing. It's just that you need to problematize it in such a way that it's a researchable problem that you are suggesting a solution to. So I'm fascinated by all this. It's actually great. And please just keep on engaging us on this work, because at the end of the day, you're also not doing it for yourself. You're also doing it for the nations and for the field within which you are studying. So it's actually a very for the community that the scientific community that we are trying to build here. And please pardon us if we ask too many questions. It's because of the fact that we want to make sure that the benefits, go way beyond your certificate when you have already done your work and you're out of it. So at least we can rely on that.
My interest is on the property rights of women and children in customary marriages. And basically, my participants are just going to be women and children, basically in rural areas. I think Limpopo at this present moment, and especially to those who, after the death of their father or husband, experiences property losses. For example, you will find that.
So Limpopo, are you're talking about? You're looking at a particular section, geography, location in Limpopo, or is the entire Limpopo?
Just a particular section of Limpopo, because I'm still at the proposal stage. I'm still battling there.
Yes, you need to identify. You need to identify. You need to identify. Oh, sorry. I think there's a lag on our conversation. Sorry about that, Tabitha. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Once a father or a husband passes away, you'll find that certain women and children loses their properties. And in the rural areas, we experience cases where the wife will then be chased away, and also her children affected. In some cases, just children only that are affected. And you find that they lose their property rights and there's no protection thereof. So I'll be looking at a number of cases like the Bear case, the Mabena versus Letswalo, the Mosenege case. Yeah, so I'm at the proposal stage. And I think these classes will also assist in moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Please, just put together your proposal. Next time when we interact, we're gonna just ask, quite a number of questions, but we'll be looking at a population sampling strategies and all that, just to bring the discussion forward, because that will be our next discussion on population sampling strategies and so on. So, ladies and gentlemen, this then today concludes our discussion. But maybe just so you know, we've got and we'll share this with Godfrey, is that there are common research methodologies that we're talking about, different types. We were talking about action research. We talk about case study. We spoke about content analysis, correlational study, design-based study, developmental study, ethnographies, experimental research, ex post facto, and so on. As I said, this information will be shared immediately with Godfrey, but we'll talk to it when we now move into a population, because as I said in my earlier conversation, that whichever approach you pick up, just remember that it has to be backed up by collection of data, analysis of data, and interpretation of data, which is what research is about. You collect, you analyze, and you interpret. Now, to get there, it's all these difficult discussions that we are having. And once all this is sorted, you will realize that to go and collect data, to go and analyze data is the easiest of the processes, and then to interpret the data, because collected and analyzed data, if it's not interpreted, is meaningless. We don't know what to make of a data that is not being interpreted. So that is our story today. And I would like to thank all of you for your indulgence. Thank you very much.